Okay, well, I figured I would do this before I went to sleep. I'm just having one of those days, nights, whatever you call it. But yeah, I meant to complete my live last time, but it wasn't enough time. The battery had died on me, so I was, out of battery. And what I meant to talk about was I wanted to go more into some of the aspects of what a total food and fuel collapse is going to do and look like, as well as, you know, what the actual situation will look like when things deteriorate into an internal conflict. Hey, Heather. Um, Good to see you. Yeah, when things deteriorate into an internal conflict, basically, I was going to use my documentaries as like a template sort of a deal. Hold on a second, Heather. I'm trying to do something for you. I see you there. It's not letting me do it. Oh, dang. Well, anyway, yeah. For some reason, my phone's not working the way it should be. It's being weird on me. Um, I was trying to make you a moderator. I can't do it, Heather, right now. But anyways, I wanted to talk about some of the aspects of what to expect when those sorts of things happen, and the type of effect it's going to have on logistics for all sorts of things. Now, I want you all to think for a second with me. Just take a little trip in your minds. Now, if any of you have ever flown on commercial flights and you've ever looked out the window, if you've had a window seat, you've seen how vast, how big this country is as far as like, looking down and seeing like all the microscopic, farms and homes and everything like that. Um, what I was talking about last time that was a little bit that I didn't get to go into, which was a little bit of a large sort of a explanation. I wanted to say that if you've driven across this country or flown on commercial flights, there's Romero, flown on commercial flights, you would notice that, yeah, everything is very small and there's an awful lot of it. This is a big, big nation. Now, what does that have to do with what I'm saying? It has to do with this. It has to do with the fact that people get scared of the most irrational things, like that goon squad that went out to that one home uh, in Delaware. It's like it's laughable. It's like, do people have any idea how huge this country is? What it would like actually take for a lot of people to be bothered by something like that, for harassment teams to go out to disturb a lot of people, the insane amount of fuel that it would cost to conduct such operations, it's unfathomable, and they don't have the they don't have the people, they don't have the personnel to be able to do such a thing. So um, that's what I was getting at with, imagine for a second how big this country is. You would literally need at least 10 to 12 million people minimum to occupy this entire nation. There's 4 million miles of roads. They tried to do checkpoints back in 2020, but they realized that it's too hard to do. You got to be able to, run food and water and ammunition and supplies out to all these places to keep them at their garrison, at their checkpoint. If you set one up, if you establish one, they're insanely hard to run. They take a lot of people to run, and they sure don't have the people to be able to do something like that. Now, what does that have to do with a total food and fuel collapse? Well, logistics figure into everything. As I've said before, armies just can't get up and just do things. They have to have the ability to do things. They have to have the food, they got to have the fuel, the spare parts, the transportation. Transportation's a huge part of it. They have to have a whole bunch of different things to be able to conduct such operations. Now, they can't just like willy-nilly just, go and like go home to home and everything. This nation is insanely humongous. Do you know how many homes are inside of this country? Do you know how many people in this nation have firearms? And not everybody's going to act like a little cuckold like that guy that answered his door. I mean, you're going to have people that, Well, I don't have to say it. I think you kind of know what I'm getting at. You're going to have people that, make different choices, I'll just say, as far as how they handle that type of thing. If it were to even happen, it almost looked like a made for TV sort of moment, because it's like they picked like the most like cowardly, most weak-minded person that they could find, that they could pick on, that would make an example to scare a whole bunch of people, to be used as fear and agitation propaganda. Well, guess what? If you don't have the fuel, you can't conduct little operations like that with your, goon squads, your paramilitary goon squads, and you sure can't conduct military operations without fuel. It doesn't matter what sorts of vehicles and everything you have. Oh, and by the way, the thumbnail, that's the PLZ-05, which is a Chinese 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzer. It has like it's a longer howitzer than our Paladin. It's like a longer gun. It's a longer barrel. It's got a bit more range, and it's overall it's a bigger piece than the Paladin that I was on, which was a self-propelled artillery piece. But yeah, that PLZ-05, that ain't nothing to mess with. That the Chinese have some pretty badass artillery, and they have a lot of it. They, on the other hand, they have humongous stocks of fuel, food. As I've told you all before, they've hoarded food. This year, the amount of food they've hoarded is insane. They've hoarded 50% or more of most of the world's food supply. Now, you would only be doing that if you were getting ready for a conflict or an emergency. I mean, it's obvious. Same with the fuel. They've hoarded a lot of extra fuel. They've gotten they've gotten what I've read off before as far as the numbers. I don't have the sheet in front of me. I'm laying in bed, but they get roughly the same amount of fuel from Russia via ship that they do via pipeline, because they've increased their imports of oil from Russia. Now, why would they do that? When they're already, having excess oil, because they're already meeting not only their nation's demand, but they're also getting extra oil from Iran and other places in the Middle East, and they're about to do their petro-yuan, which ties in with the financial stuff that I've told you about in the last live. This is a continuation of that. Now, you still have people who are talking about things that they just don't even know what they're even talking about. It's like, where do some of these people get things? I saw a certain person, they basically took exactly what Gonzalo Lira said, but it's almost like as if they appropriated it for themselves. It's like, dang, you didn't even you almost said it word for word that he said, and you didn't even give him no credit for it. It's like, Gonzalo Lira is a pretty smart dude, but if I watch him and I see something that he says that I agree with, I'd be sure to mention that he said something. If somebody says something and I want to quote it, that's called, quoting something. It's not, plagiarizing is when you take what somebody said verbatim, or damn near verbatim, and you appropriate it for yourself. Now, there's people that think they're slick trying to do stuff like that, take other people's work and appropriate it for themselves. I ain't naming no names, but I mean, it's going on, and it's ridiculous. But anyways, he is right. That is a possibility. That is something that could indeed definitely occur. You might see something like that happen, to where, yeah, maybe, I mean, it's plausible. Maybe the American intelligence community would get rid of Z, but I think it's more likely that Z flees to one of his, foreign mansions, and the whole Ukrainian government just collapses on itself, and Russia declares victory anyway. I don't think that, even if they take him out, I don't think that it's going to make that much of a difference, because, look, Ukraine, they're tired of fighting. They're not going to go for any sort of insurgency after their whole nation was just laid waste by this tiny Russian force that was sent in there that did this immense amount of damage to their country. I think they're done fighting. I think they're pretty much wore out. They don't have really the ability to sustain any sort of a guerrilla operation when most of their fighting age men are either dead, they're in Russian POW camps, or they fled to other nations. So again, I've predicted months ago. This was months ago that I made these predictions. You can go see. You can go back and check. I said that Ukraine would collapse sometime in July. And again, there could be a margin of error, but it's not very much. It could be that it happens in early August or whatever, but it's not going to be off by much. We're still in July. Anything can happen. I mean, they could even have a coup or something like that. Look, it's the Godfather. He wants to be next to his piece in case he has to whack somebody. I'm just making fun of you, buddy. I'm just making fun of you. Just poking fun at you. This is a fat cat. Look at him. This cat's fat. But yeah, basically, they are on the verge of collapse. We are on the verge of, we're on the verge of a food and fuel collapse, an economic collapse, and a financial collapse as well. Now, you're gonna see these things occur, and when it occurs, like I've shown in my depictions with the hypotheticals, you're going to see civil unrest occur. And when that occurs, then you're going to see different factions come out of the woodwork. They will come out of the woodwork. This nation has nearly 340 million people in it. It is naive to think that there's not people with their own agendas plotting in the shadows that have their own plans, that have organized their own sorts of I guess you could say revolutions or whatever you want to say. They have nothing to do with the regime. They have their own lust for power, and they have their own ideologies. They're going to create a new paradigm when this happens, and only the common people are going to suffer from it, okay? What I mean by that is that every ordinary person that's trying to make a living out there, that's trying to survive, when the scramble is on for the remaining resources between the different factions, the common people are going to be the ones that suffer. And as I said at the end of my documentary, if you find yourself in certain factional areas of control where they have authority or where they claim authority and they take control, your best bet is to stay away from big cities, obviously, because there's going to be a lot of contested areas in big cities. Look what happened in Syria. Look what happened in Syria. Look what happened to their cities in Syria. You had like four-way battles going on in Aleppo and other places. I've shown you all that video before. I rotate stuff through my community tab so that people can still go back and read the stories. That's why I rotate things. That's why I'll remove things. I'll leave things up for a little bit of time. I don't want to clog it up so that people can still go back and read the invasion stories, which are very good too. That's a great indication of how it's going to be when this country is invaded. That's the invasion aspect of it. I did two different timelines. I did the hypothetical internal conflict Syrian style with factions, and that's the most likely thing that's going to happen, okay? That's the most likely, because you're going to have, again, different people with different ideologies, different goals, different objectives, different plans that they've already laid out in private, and they're going to come out of the shadows. Civil unrest is going to be how they make their debut and how they make their power plays and start seizing control of different areas, just like I depicted. And you're seeing fertile grounds for that very type of thing happening. You're literally seeing exactly what I said at the beginning of that documentary. You're witnessing the overreach. You're witnessing the psyops. You're witnessing the false flags. You're witnessing the economic, financial, and food and fuel collapse. And the food and fuel part of it's coming very soon. It's not going to be long. So, you don't have long to wait. I said August for that. It could be early September at the latest, but I'm still sticking by my predictions for Ukraine collapse and food and fuel collapse. And I made those predictions months ago. And, I'm pretty accurate. I mean, it's really coming to pass. So, when those things occur, common people, it would behoove them to get as far away from cities as possible. You want to stay away from any type of frontline areas where there's different factions duking it out, sort of like how, you saw the areas where battles occurred at. Well, any type of front line area where there's fighting going on or contested areas, you want to get as far away from those as possible. You want to stay kind of gray man. You sort of want to hide. You don't want to make, don't draw attention to yourself. If you know that a certain faction has a certain ideology, don't do anything to provoke them to wrath. And, for God's sake, defend yourself. Defend yourself. Arm yourself, suit up and defend yourself. I mean, hell, the armor I have makes me almost impervious to small arms fire because I've seen the types of plates, the sappy plates. I have the AR-500 steel. I watch them dump mag after mag after mag of 5.56 and 7.62 by 39 into it. Yes, I love you too, Romero. I love you too. wants to be all up on me here. Yeah, but that I've witnessed them dump mag after mag after mag into those plates, and they're very, very sturdy, very durable, very strong armor plates. Now, yes, it weighs more than ceramic plates, the ceramic sappies, but you get a lot more protection out of it. It's all in the personal preference of the wearer. You either can get a ceramic plate that might be a little cheaper. Potentially if it's like used, you could get a used ceramic plate that's cheaper, but it offers you less protection, but it does weigh less. It'll shatter after about, 4 to 6 hits from like, a 7.62 by 39, like your standard AK round. About 4 to 6 hits will shatter it. It will shatter the plate. You put the plates in your body armor or in your plate carrier, which is designed just to carry the sappy plates themselves without the extra armor. I have full-on, military spec body armor. I have the German surplus armor. So, yeah, it's all in the personal preference of the wearer. Again, for me to have a plate that you could just keep, just dumping these into, that makes me feel really, really secure to have something like that I can wear. Again, as long as you're up against small arms and they all hit you in the chest, you're in good shape. You might get cracked ribs or something, but you're going to be all right. You're not going to get killed. So, that's just talking about protection. Now, again, we're talking about all the different scenarios that are coming up here. So I was talking about an internal conflict, the types of things you want to do. You want to be a very defensive person, but you want to remain gray. You don't want to stand out. Now, in an invasion, you want to evacuate. That's the first thing you do in an invasion is you evacuate. Now, if you imagine yourself as if you were a character in one of my stories, in the Broken Bow story, what occurred was, that the power had been out, the power and the grid were down. In the beginning of the story, the guy's friend Gary, he's a hunter. He was out hunting, and he was in his tree stand, and he was hunting near the municipal airport. Well, he saw, or heard rather, a bunch of vehicles. He kind of crept close to see who it was, and it was a Chi-Com scouting element. They were moving into the municipal airport, scouting ahead so that they could build a fob there. They were in a tertiary area, so they were not in the main, or primary or secondary invasion areas where the Trojans struck first, or where the externals began to fan out as soon as they came in to help the Trojans. So, what occurred then was Gary he told the townspeople, and he told Jim. Jim's the main character in the story. Now, Jim was a Afghan war veteran. There were a lot of veterans living in Broken Bow in my story. He quickly organized them before the scouting element, hours later, began to probe the town. The very first day they made contact, they were probing the town to check it for who was there, the strength, like to do their salute report, to do their initial, scouting. So they went and did a probing attack on the town. Okay. So the townspeople by this point were organized. They had started to make some Molotov cocktails. They began to fight back. It was a small Chi-Com scouting element. It was just a company. It was a recon scout company. They had armor personnel carriers, and it was just like basically a light infantry force. Well, they went into the town. They did like sort of a pincer maneuver where there were dismounts that were leaping and bounding, bounding and covering rather toward the town, and they were getting in a shootout with them. And then the guys in the vehicles, the APCs, they went and set up a little. They captured the town center. They captured the town square, and they established an observation point there. Like they turned it into like a little combat outpost / observation point, and they were launching their quadcopter drones to do more reconnaissance. They were preparing for the encirclement of the town, which commenced early the next morning. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because I'm telling you the types of things you can expect to see when they come into a small town. Now, in the second story, it was in a humongous major city. Now, the main one of the main characters, he was an active duty soldier at Fort Huachuca. He was on leave. He came back to Phoenix. Well, he was in his apartment. The grid, the power, everything went down. Communications went down. And then a lot of noise commenced very, very soon thereafter. A lot of noise. What that was it was all the different Trojans emerging, seizing key buildings, establishing cordons and checkpoints, and basically like locking down the city. They were locking down the city. And they were hitting a lot of key areas with artillery, rockets, everything. The vehicles began to race down the street and, smash down barriers to buildings that they were going to, climb in the windows of and raid and everything else. They did building assault tactics on all these different buildings in Phoenix. Well, okay, so that's a city. So what I'm getting at by telling you all this is that you need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. You need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. So when these types of things begin to occur, you're not going to freeze like a deer in the headlights. You're going to know that you need to get out of there. You need to get out. You need to get out of the hot zone. It is going to happen like that. It's exactly how it's going to happen. That's what their doctrines stipulate. If you read their literature, that's what they say out of their own mouths. That is what they've been training to do. That's how they're going to do it. They've been setting up for it forever. Why do you think they bought the ports? Why do you think they bought all these different CCP properties throughout the United States that they took over and bought? That's for staging their forces. It's for staging their logistics. You got to understand, too, a massive undertaking like this, a humongous undertaking like this is going to cost an immense amount of logistics. It's going to cost an immense amount of fuel, food, water, medical supplies, ammunition, shells, spare parts for vehicles, transportation, everything they need, they have on their CCP properties. That's why they bought them. That's why they're set up. They had 20 plus years to set up covertly right under everybody's nose, and they sure did it. They sure did it. They've owned the ports that long. They've owned CCP properties that long. So over the course of some 20 years, plus years, I should say, 20 plus years, can you even fathom the amount of vehicles and supplies and everything that's brought in? So you got people gagging and tripping over some NATO thing in Norfolk. I'm like, are you people crazy? Do you not understand that there's literally thousands upon thousands of Chi-Com bases inside this country? And people don't realize it either, but did you know that the Germans have an air base at Holloman Air Base? It's like a joint base. It's like a German-U.S. base. They've had forces at Holloman Air Force Base for the longest time. And nobody ever made a stink about that, but yet people are worried about some NATO thing at Norfolk. It's like, come on. You guys, like people are, like, hyping. Like, they're getting into all these hype stories, and it's like, man, the Germans had a base in Holloman forever, and everybody's, like, freaking out over the French taking over Norfolk. It's like, come on now. You guys not even, like, realize that we've had foreign troops here for longer than that? The Germans had their North American Air Command at Holloman Air Force Base. You sure can go look it up. It's true. It's there. That's in New Mexico. So, but none of that matters because I'm talking about Chi-Com bases. I'm talking about Chi-Com and Russian and their allied bases. They have thousands of them. So people shouldn't get hung up on like one NATO thing or like, or even if the people did raise a stink about the Germans being here, so what? I showed you all how weak the European NATO countries are. It's not like they're like very much of a threat, Like all they have here is like some ancillary type stuff. It's not anything that would make any sort of a real difference here. It's a joke, it's a joke. So, here's the other thing. While they're establishing their logistics and supplies and everything else there, this dude's fat. You're fat, dude. Nah, before I continue with that, I was going to tell you all, I don't know what's wrong with my cat Porky, my Russian blue. He's having I don't know if he's depressed or what, but he's not eating as much as he normally does. I was kind of getting worried about him. He'll eat the wet cat food I got. I've got a little bit of that on hand, but he's having a hard time eating dry food, and I'm not understanding it. I hope he's all right. But, for now, I'm giving him the wet cat food, hoping that he's going to get over whatever kind of funk he's in. So, he'll be all right. But, this dude here, he's got a lot of weight to spare. Don't you? Fat, dude. You're fat. But yeah, so here's the thing. You have them storing up all these logistics, and they're based very, very close to their objectives. Now, for them to be based really close to their objectives makes a humongous difference in how fast their operation can commence and proceed. So they can basically they can move rather quick. I mean, they can take and seize their objectives quick. Knock me off the air. I'm running low on battery. But yeah, I was gonna say, I was talking about all the different things like threats that you would face, that you would need to deal with and get away from. So you would need to evacuate in both cases, whether you're rural or whether you're urban. Now, in the stories, they didn't know, they had no actionable intel. They had no actionable intel on where the enemies were, where they were coming from, what they even had, what they were attacking with, what type of unit it was, none of that. All of that figures in to the types of things you'll be facing. Now, they're going to see you before you see them, which is why you do what the characters in the story did, and you stay low and you stay moving. You stay moving. You don't stay in one spot for too long. You keep moving. You dip, you dodge, you get behind cover and concealment, preferably something that offers you both, because concealment isn't necessarily cover, but cover is usually concealment. Unless it's like bulletproof glass, then it's transparent, so then it's not concealment, it's just cover. But cover and concealment is like when you're hidden and it's behind something that can offer you a measure of protection. Like sandbags. Now that's cover and concealment. If you get down behind some sandbags or HESCO barriers, which are like the walls they built our combat outposts and FOBs with in Iraq. They're like walls. They're like metal and burlap that you can fill with dirt, and you can make like walls. You can even build like little guard towers out of them like the Iraqis did. But because we gave them HESCO barriers to build their own little places too. So here's the deal. You want to go, you want to dip, you want to dodge, you want to get behind buildings. Now, in the second story, you saw how they dipped out into the sewers. Now, that was a brilliant way to evade a lot of what was going on in the surface. If you can get into like sewers and maintenance tunnels and places that you can travel underground. Now, they did get lost. They did get lost in that second story. So they had to emerge and climb up a building that they had to like go into like the basement level 2. Like, there's like B1 and B2. Like B2 is like the lowest basement, and B1's like the first basement. Then you're on the first floor. Then you're in the, so on and so forth. Well, they had to go through like a door in a maintenance tunnel that led them to like the B2 of a big bank building or an office building. And they were able to go up and like get high enough to see where they were, but the building was under assault because there were Americans that were armed who were taking cover in there. So there was like a battle going on for it. I've shown that in my community tab story review. I showed that exact scenario. Now, what they did was they climbed up, they saw where they were, so they could kind of ascertain where they were underground in the sewers, so that they could like keep on moving and head the right way. They were trying to get out of the city. Now, again, you don't want to be in a city, but if you find yourself trapped in a city, you have to think outside the box. You have to learn to use rubble or whatever buildings are still standing, you have to use them as cover and concealment. You have to dip and dodge. You have to run. When you cross streets or alleys, you run. Now, if you watched my community tab story review, the building assault tactic video, you saw how they crossed hallways. Well, that applies for streets too. Now, that was how 4 people did it, like a stack team, like a 4 to 5 man stack team did it like that. Now, you could do it like that too. You could practice that if you have a group, so you can move safer. You can be safer. You can move defensively and try to evade. Like, you could try to get out of the way. You want to get away from whatever's around you that's hostile, that's attacking. You want to go as far out of the city as you preferably can. Like in the first story too, in the town, they tried to hold open an evacuation route so that everybody possible could escape the town. Now, not everybody got out. Not everybody got out, but a lot of people did flee, and they brought logistics with them. They took all the food they could out of the grocery store that was in the town. They took whatever they could with them from their homes. They took ammo, they took blankets, they took medical supplies, they took everything they could from that town by truck, by car, by whatever means they had available, while some of the armed townspeople tried to hold open Route 259, which led from the town right up into the Ozarks, into the foothills, where there were the cabins and the lake and everywhere where they hid out for about a month. They hid out for a month before they were found. Now, again, that was a mistake that was made, but they learned from it, and then they began to become nomadic and semi-nomadic. Semi-nomadic is when you have pre-prepared places that you rotate between to stay on the move, to stay unpredictable, to stay out of the enemy's sights, if at all possible. Now, I'm giving you survival tips. I'm trying to tell you all things you can do to survive a war. Now, if you understand how this stuff works, what you can do, again, logistics factor into everything. That's been a theme throughout this entire video, okay? You're not going to operate on an empty stomach. You're not going to operate without water. You're going to need an immense amount of water and food and ammunition and whatever else you can, medical supplies, whatever else you can put and cache away. You want to cache away. You're not going to operate far from your supplies, okay? You're just not. You're not going to be able to carry that much with you on foot. Vehicles are going to be a no-go because that's just going to make you a target for airstrikes or drone strikes or artillery strikes or whatever type of strikes, missiles, whatever, ambushes. That's going to make you a target. So you don't want to be in a vehicle, obviously, and you're probably not going to because, eventually people are going to run out of fuel or they're not going to have any fuel to begin with due to the fuel collapse. Now, it's my understanding that they're trying, the Chi-Coms and our other enemies are trying to collapse our economy and help with our food and fuel collapse, while these Western elites are doing a good enough job, they're doing a great job, actually, at hurting themselves, hurting their own power base, which hurts us because we, unfortunately, comprise their power base. Our economy is what keeps them rich. Our economy is what keeps them protected. But if they're collapsing their own power base, and the Chi-Coms and the Russians are helping them to do that, even though they're rivals, they're both trying to destroy us. We're being destroyed by 2 different entities with 2 different goals. One entity is bent on self-destruction so that they think they could resurrect a new society, a new reset that they're calling it, but they're never going to have it because the Chinese and Russians are going to come in and colonize us, and they're going to destroy the Western elites. They're going to destroy them. They're enemies. They're rivals. They hate the West. They hate the West. They hate its elites. They hate what we stand for. So we're being destroyed by the East and by the West. So we're caught in the middle of that. And I'm trying to tell you what to do to survive when we get invaded based on where you're at, whether it's urban or whether it's rural, okay? Now, the rural scenario, you want to get out into the woods. You want to go up into the high ground if you can, like they went up in the Ozark Mountains, and they, the Chi-Coms eventually found them, but it took them time. They had to consolidate their power. After the invasion phase was over, they were building up their FOBs, they were moving in their logistics, their food, their fuel, everything they would need to launch major operations, which gave them time to sort of be situated up there for about a month or so, okay? So while they were up there, they didn't realize that they needed to, go on ahead and move again because, they were going to get found and then they were going to get attacked. They didn't realize it was time to do that. So they did. They got surrounded. The Chi-Coms went up 259. They went into the woods. They blocked them between the lake. The north, to the north, they blocked them off. They blocked them, like, had them pincered between, like, the road, the north, and the lake. The north was, like, more just up in the mountains. They sent in their 5 companies to block their northern escape. They had their armor battalion block 259 all the way up and down it, and then they had their Nicaraguan, company and a few other of their PAP companies blocking the south. So they were pincered between all these 4. There's trapped between the lake and 3 other ways that were blocking them off. So they did a sweep once they did that. The forces from the north pressed south, because what they were going to do is they were going to sweep the whole area, the entire area, and clear it of all the partisans that were hiding there. So they didn't escape, but only a few did, because they broke out. They had to fight their way out of the encirclement. But that's the type of things that's going to happen to you if you stay in one spot. I put examples of all sorts of things people should have paid attention to in those stories. That's why I made reviews about them. I showed the types of movements that occur, why they occur, how they occur. Everything is dependent. Everything hinges upon logistics. Now, of course, our depleted woke military does not have the logistics to do much of anything. Like I told you all, they can only control small little tiny areas like some big cities, and that's really it. They just don't have the manpower to control anything other than their loyalist areas, like I showed on the map. That map I made is about as close to the reality as you're ever going to see. The map I made for that documentary on the internal conflict. Now, that's about as realistic as it gets, like as far as like what they can actually really control in reality, while everything else is like torn to shit and ripping itself apart and breaking away. They can only control like their little globalist friendly areas, and that's about all they can do. They don't have the logistics to be everywhere, you guys. They just don't. They're not that big. They're not that equipped. Look, if a food and fuel collapse affects their logistics too, it's not like they're just gonna like pool a bunch of fuel to be able to run all their vehicles everywhere they want to go out of their bums. It's not like they're just going to be able to pool all this food for these massive operations out of their bums. I told you about how much it takes to power an operation, even a moderately to a small-sized one. I guess like a large-small operation going up toward the moderate end, like where you had 7,000. You had like 3,000 logistical guys backing up 4,000 combat troops in the field, which was a mixture of Americans, Iraqi puppet forces, and some of the foreign allies we had. So yeah, it takes immense amount of logistics. That was a 5-month operation, Saber Tempest, and it took like incredible amounts of logistics to be able to even do that. That's not something you can just do willy-nilly. You have to have facilities for maintenance, to maintain your vehicles. You have to have POL products, which are your oils, your lubricants, your hydraulic fluids for like, our guns used hydraulic fluids, oils, fuel. You have to have all of that stuff. You have to have medical supplies. You got to have trained personnel. You have to have cooks, because people have to make the food, if you're eating regular meals, or you have to have immense stocks of MREs, because sometimes that's all you can eat is MREs or canned goods. You have to have all these things. You're not just going to like launch an operation just because. You can't just get up and just do some operation. You have to have the logistics to back it up. People don't understand that about militaries. It takes training to be able to operate certain types of equipment. You have to train your troops in it. It takes a lot of logistics to be able to launch a major operation, or even just a small operation. They don't have. Yeah, I have to plug my charger in, bro. I can't like show anymore. Yeah, he took off. He went to go eat some more food. He's just dreaming about pasta and everything. He's a mob boss. Romero the cat. Yeah. But anyway, I'm just talking about how all these things work, okay, and what the threats are. Now, the Chinese, they've stockpiled immense logistics. They have enough logistics to conquer much of the world if they want to. Just the gargantuan, ginormous amount of food they've hoarded just this year. Allegedly now they have a bumper crop. If that's even true, then there's more food. They can get whatever else they need from Russia on the cheap, because Russia's their chief ally. They already get a ton of fuel from Russia, spare fuel. They're getting ready, man. They're getting ready for something major. And as far as like people freaking out about AI, well, guess what? The CCP has some of the most advanced AI on the planet. They're in control of it. They're in control of it. You know, that AI is programmed to be, you know, pro CCP. You know, there's nothing scarier than a communist robot. Okay, I mean, you know, but I mean, really, you know, the CCP is the biggest threat that the world has right now. I mean, it really is. Them and Russia together, especially, but even just China alone, their Belt and Road scam, just their ability to like dominate all these third world nations. They're about to gobble up Sri Lanka, who can't pay their debts because of their default. You know, they're going to put a Chinese puppet regime in there next. They're taking over the world, you guys. I mean, they really are, through cunning, through stealth, and then they're going to do it through overt military conquest, and that goes for like the West. As far as the West goes, China and Russia are going to take over the West through overt military conquest in World War III. You know, people scoff, they don't believe it. Well, guess what? Believe it. You know, we're not the premier, you know, nation anymore. China has dethroned us, and they're the premier nation in real terms, facts, figures, stats, capabilities, and data points. You know, there's no one that can compete with China right now in anything, not in technology. You know, they're like, when it comes to AI, they're making miniature artificial stars. I mean, they have fractional orbital bombardment systems that basically work. I mean, they're basically, you know, almost dead on balls accurate. They're only like 8 miles off, but with a nuke, it doesn't even matter. You know, you're going to still obliterate whatever you set out to destroy. I mean, you know, I'm sure they got it perfected by now because their first tests were incredibly accurate for just first tests. They've got missile cloaking. They've got hypersonics. I mean, all their nukes are newer. You know, they've really, their nuke arsenal is up to date. It's maintained well, and they have enough based on the number of silos and the number of fissile material they've had access to for, you know, the last couple decades. You know, they've had enough to build the amount of nukes they have, about 1,000. You know, some say it's more, some give a real lowball estimate, like some 400 or 450. I don't know. No, it's about 1,000. That's the most realistic estimate. It's a state secret, so I mean, you sort of have to guess, but you know, you can guess based on facts, and what isn't classified is the amount of fissile material they had. Okay, they had 20 to 22 tons of enriched uranium, you know, weapons-grade uranium. They've had 4 tons of plutonium. That's enough for over 1,000 nukes, but I'm just going to go with the high median and say it's 1,000. And they're all up to date. They all work. You know, I can't say the same for our arsenal. And our arsenal's been reduced by treaty to what we can deploy. The rest of it's just sitting in warehouses, you know, collecting dust, because due to the treaty, the SALT, START, and all those treaties, you know, we're only allowed to deploy X amount of nukes, you know, at the same time anyway. And we're already deploying under the amount of nukes that we have authorized by treaty to deploy. So China's like right up there with us anyway in the amount of nukes that they have. That might be their total nukes, but their total nukes equal the amount of nukes we have deployed roughly. You know, they're a little less, but it's still enough to destroy 2 large nations. But they don't primarily depend on their nuke arsenal because they don't need to. The instrument of Chinese foreign policy is their gargantuan, ginormous, freakishly huge, behemoth paramilitary and active military, okay? That is the instrument of their foreign policy. That's how they achieve their foreign policy, through their military strength and through their economic and financial power. You know, they have the biggest gold holdings. They're doing a petro-yuan. They're about to do a digi-yuan, digital yuan. They're going into their SIPS system. They're not going broke. They're weaponizing their banks against the West because it's going to crater Western investments and destroy our way of life as a result, because it's going to do a domino effect, and it's going to topple all these Western financial institutions that, by the way, they've also infiltrated with key CCP regime members in key positions. So yeah, we're being set up for a kill shot. We're being set up for a kill, and people they're not recognizing reality that's like right before us. You know, so when the day comes that, you know, we do have a multi-factional internal conflict like Syria, you know, we ain't special. You know, I mean, it's going to happen here too. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You know, so when the day comes that we just, you know, rip ourselves to pieces, guess who the winner is? You know, it's China. It's China. they'd kick our ass all over the map even if we didn't rip ourselves to shreds. But imagine how much weaker we'll be once once all the most capable, types of fighting age people have like obliterated each other, and then they come in. Who's going to put up any sort of like a guerrilla force against the occupation? Nobody, because guess what? We were too busy ripping ourselves apart. That's what China's counting on. They're very austere. They're austere. They don't want to have to spend, anything extra than what they know they already got to spend. As far as money, resources, men, material. They're very cheap. Let's just put it like that. Their elites are very austere-minded, people. They're frugal. They're cheap. They don't want to have to do anything that goes out of their way. Like if they don't have to, then they won't do it. They'll just let us do it for them. Which is why I'm warning people. I'm warning people that these things are coming. I don't want to see it happen because I live here. I have a son. I have a family. I don't want to see, that happen where, people I love and care about are caught up in it and obliterated by war. I've been to war. It's ugly. It's ugly. And what I saw in Iraq doesn't even scrape the surface of what's coming here. And the internal conflict would only be an appetizer anyway. The real big stuff would be right thereafter when the Chi-coms come in and just, carpet munition this place to oblivion. There'd be nothing left. And that's what they're going to do. We're being set up in like 7 ways to Sunday for an epic fail. They're talking about gutting even more troops from our military for not taking the abomination, for not taking the mark. So, that's like a setup for a different faction. That's like getting them ready to, defect and join some sort of a faction when the internal conflict happens, like when there's a collapse. You might see all those guys that they were talking about axing, you might see them become the Free American Army. Like all these things you see in real life are literally parallels of the exact things I talked about in my documentaries. Yet people don't want to go and watch those. I put all that work and effort into it, Oh, man. Cut me off. Going with it, it just keeps kicking me off because the battery's so damn low. I thought I could actually go a decent way. I don't know what's going on with this phone lately, but it's like every time I try to do it live, this thing tries to kill my battery. It tries to drain it all down, So, yeah, what I was getting at is I did all that work, I didn't even have to do any of that, all right? I ain't got to spend my time like that, that's another reason why I'm, getting off of YouTube, it's like, I do all this, and it's like, it's not even making it to people, so it's like, what's even the point, what's the point? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go do my audiobook, just, because I feel like doing it, I'm going to do my audiobook. And then I'm just going to call it quits. I'm going to do intermittent, maybe Friday shows, while that's going on. And then, I'll do the audiobook, I'll be able to read out, what the invasion looks like in a story. Like I typed, I understand people don't like to read those, because they don't like to, scroll or whatever the case, but, it is what it is, So, Yeah, no problem, California Prepper. I appreciate you, man. I'm glad you enjoy it. I do know some people are getting it and some people are watching it, and I do appreciate that. But it's like, I've got to compete with all these junk, current events things and hype things that people are putting out, and it's like, man, I'm trying to show people like what's coming and how to survive it, and then people get hung up on like, little junk, hype things, and it just drives me out of my mind like you don't even understand. It really does. It drives me out of my mind because I see people falling for all kinds of crazy, madness, and none of it even makes sense. And it's like people aren't like using common sense or discernment to like look at it and see it all for what it is. It's like, look, I'm trying to show people what's coming, exactly how it's coming, and how to get through it, how to navigate it. These things are real, like this is real stuff. This is real shit, I mean, and then you got, people putting out a bunch of hype, and it's like, why are people, surfing and, look, are they like trying to get like a cortisol hit or what? Like, what are they trying to do? It's like, here I am, I'm sitting here putting out like, grade A information. I'm trying to show people what this shit moves like, what it's like, what it looks like, what it's like from different levels, macro, micro, and by micro I mean like street level. Like you're like in the point of view of the character. You're literally watching it all going on around you, see, that's the thing. Now, getting back to what I was saying, there's going to be like a lot of reactionary idiots that, like think that they're going to like take on the whole Chi-Com army, and they're going to like run out with like a shotgun, and, like shotguns aren't like the best, war weapon. So, you want you a good rifle. You want you a good rifle, preferably semi-automatic, you don't, a shotgun ain't gonna cut it, but you got like these reactionary people. They think they're gonna be like some kind of Call of Duty person, and they're gonna like run out and engage different Chi-Coms, and they're gonna use like a pump shotgun to do it. And it's like, man, wake up, dude. Like, get a grip on yourself, man. Get a grip. You ain't gonna do none of that. You're gonna get yourself killed. What you should do is you should learn how to navigate, how to use cover and concealment. You ought to go out in the woods. You better be training. You better be training. You better be training. You better be training with a crew too, because loners don't make it very long. It's best to have at least a few people with you, that can watch your back. You better be training with them. You better go look at tactical videos and train. Yes, knowing tactics is a good thing. Like I watch that guy sometimes, Popular Preparedness. He's all right, but like he's like, trash talking, learning tactics. And I'm like, are you crazy? So like, he maybe didn't mean it that way. I'm just going to go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't mean it that way. But the way it came off, it sounded like he was bashing, like tactical training. And it's like, what? That might save your life. That might make the difference between you being dead and you knowing how to react to a situation in the proper way so that you can navigate it and not get yourself obliterated, not get yourself annihilated, not get yourself cut down, You got to know how to use cover and concealment. You got to know how to move in formations, like tactical formations. You got to, you learn how to move in a wedge, learn how to move in a, single column, or, if you have enough people, a double column. You got to learn how to, oh, look, I made tactical videos. I show outdoor stuff and I show indoor, like building assault tactics. Learn all that stuff. You can go out in the woods and learn some of that stuff, learn how to do all that, I started basic, and I worked my way up with all those videos. I start from basic concepts, and I work my way up to more advanced things. Now, if you're getting to like where you can like actually sit through those and watch them, you're going to learn a treasure trove of information. You're going to learn about nomadism, semi-nomadism, how to go out and cache away supplies. Again, back to logistics. You cannot operate far from where your logistics are. You can't, because how are you going to go somewhere and not have food or water or ammunition nearby? What are you going to like carry it all with you? You can't carry that much weight, especially in a situation like that. Shit, man, you got to have caches. You got to have places where you cache away things out in nature where no one else knows where they're at but you. Or whoever you trust, whoever's with you. You got to learn tactics. Yes, you do. You got to learn those. You got to equip yourself. Get you some good body armor, a helmet, or at least a plate carrier or something. You got to get you something that'll like bulletproof you a little bit. I mean, yeah, sure, if you get hit, but it's gonna hurt. But you're gonna be alive. You're gonna be alive. Moving targets are hard to hit, but when you have a bunch of different enemies shooting at you at the same time, it makes you easier to hit, if you get what I'm saying. So, you got to learn how to move quick. You got to learn how to do your, tactical training. You got to learn these different tactics. Look, I got a whole thing about that in my community tab story review. I show you how, the different threats like snipers and landmines, how traps are placed. I show all of those things. I take examples from the stories to do it. It's again, this damn thing keeps dying on me. But, again, this channel, when I'm done on YouTube, it'll be a floater channel so that I'll have all my stuff up where everybody can see it. You can use it as resources, learn from it. Please learn from it. That's why I did all this stuff. I don't make no money for this. No one put me up to this. I do this on my own accord. So, if people want to learn, use resources available to you. Scenes from the Invasion right here, story conceptual art. But yeah, I'm about to call it a night, y'all. Thank you all for coming. Let me see who's here real quick before I get on or get off. All right, y'all. Y'all have a blessed night. Thanks for coming.